Desmond's trade, ugh. Desmond Bain's trade to the Bucks. Bad news on a number of fronts. We'll explain those to you and take a look at the anniversary of something most Bucks fans would like to forget. That comes your way next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. You can find me on the Bucks Radio Network. You can hear Camille as an NBA analyst on Locked On NBA and the Technical Foul podcast as well. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We got the rough intro out of the way, Camille, and it could be a rough upcoming season for the Bucks because we saw the first of what I would anticipate to be many moves, especially among Eastern Conference teams that say, well, why can't we be the Pacers? And look at the outlook of this conference. And that was the Magic acquiring Desmond Bain yesterday in exchange for basically offloading KCP's contract. Cole Anthony goes on the move. And 4 first-round picks, unprotected, and a pick swap. Now, I know there's a decent amount of asterisks you can apply to those first-round picks and what they're actually going to be, especially the short-term ones you would anticipate. Those aren't going to be very good picks. Mm-hmm. But to still see 4 first-round picks attached to Desmond Bain, and I know Brian Windhorst made the case of, well, you also have to look at it in that the Magic are paying to offload Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's contract. It's still going to catch a lot of people off guard to see, wait, 5 first-rounders last year for Mikal Bridges, 4 this year for Desmond Bain. Like, what is this market?
And yet somehow people thought that if Giannis requested the trade, the Bucks would only get back like 2 draft picks along the way.
With protections, too.
Right. Which, doesn't seem like we're going to have to talk about that too much because all signs indicate Giannis will be here. But, yeah, when I saw 4 first, I was like, wait, what? He got how many? And I was like, when you get a deal like that for Memphis, I was like, of course, Memphis was like, oh, yeah, like we'll make this trade because that is quite a haul to get back for one player, especially Desmond Bain. Not saying he's a bad player or anything by that stretch, but that's quite a return for that player. So I get why Memphis would do it. And for Orlando, you mentioned it, like when you're looking at the Eastern Conference and it feels like it's an open conference and it's like, hey, this could be anyone's conference this upcoming season. And for the Magic, we've talked about like the defense has been there. Like it's close. Like if they can get some shooting consistently, they're a team you have to give a lot more respect to. And they went out and they got somebody who can go and get a bucket, give you 20 points a night, shoots like I think 40% from 3. So they got somebody who fits really well with what they do on paper. And I think that makes the Magic a little bit more scary this upcoming season.
He's a career 41%. 3-point shooter. He shot 39% to your point last year, but not only is the percentage high, he's a volume shooter. Just 6 attempts a game last year, which was actually down from the year before when he was just under 9. So he's exactly what Orlando was looking for, a guy that can take threes and make them in bunches, and he's a two-way player as well. So we said it's bad news for the Bucks on a number of fronts. I mean, number one, first and foremost, we still got to see what plays out in the rest of the conference. But as of this moment, I think it's safe to project the Magic as, hey, they're probably at least the 4th team in the Eastern Conference. They're probably, if they can stay healthy, top 4 seed with the defense that they're going to carry over if Banchero and Wagner can stay healthy. And now you add Desmond Bain to the mix. So it's suddenly an Eastern Conference where you look at things and you say, so are we going to be looking at teams like the Magic and the Pacers and saying, is this our conference finals next season? So in that sense, it's bad because I think the Magic were one of those teams where, even in a gap year, quote unquote, you looked at and you said, well, I got to see what Orlando does. Maybe they remain just a defense only team and you can kind of jockey for position with them. They've now moved past you. And the other part where it's bad is you mentioned before, this just reinforces there's no package where you're going to get the value you need for Giannis in that 5 picks for Bridges, like we mentioned, 4 picks in this one, even going back to the Rudy Gobert trade. So Giannis nets you 12 first round picks. Like, what team has that?
Not a team does have it. You'd have to probably combine 2 different franchises to try to get a full value for what Giannis is. But even when thinking about Desmond Bain going for 4 first, one thing about that, you mentioned part of it is offloading the KCP contract. I also think that Orlando being able to keep Suggs in this trade also probably played into the draft compensation that the Magic had to send out for it. Because we look at that backcourt now, you have Suggs with Bain, of course, to go along with Paolo and Wagner. So it's like, and then you got Wendell Carter Jr. as the center. Like, that's a pretty solid starting 5. And I know you mentioned that Orlando could be like a sneaky Brook Lopez landing place as well, which
I don't see it now.
Like, now I don't see it as much, but even too, I did reach out to the Locked On Magic host, Philip, and I was just like, do you think Brook Lopez actually fits with Orlando? And he was like, Orlando tends to be a team that doesn't want to play as much drop coverage. So even before this move too, he was like, I'm not exactly sure how Brook would have fit there. He's like, but I can get it because of the shooting aspect of his game. And yeah, the Magic are a team now with Suggs there along with Bain. And like I mentioned, the young talent with that defense too. I would project, again, it's very early, but right now, June 16th, they seem like they're probably a top 4 team in the East.
The Suggs one is interesting because I actually don't think Memphis would have been interested in taking him back. I think this is pretty clear, and I think it's a smart play by Memphis that they're looking around the West and saying, we're not at that level. Like the Thunder still have a window of, we've talked about it before, however far out you want to extend it. Who knows what happens with Houston if they had a player like Kevin Durant? Minnesota, you got Anthony Edwards, and they've been in back-to-back conference finals. So you can just look up and down. Luka's in the West or stay in the West with the Lakers. Cooper Flag is going to the Mavs, and if they're healthy. So I think this is Memphis reading the room and saying, yeah, we're not as eligible of a bachelor as the rest of this group, so we should probably bow out of this. And, now I'm curious to see what happens with Ja Morant. If you do extend Jaren Jackson Jr., or if you look to move him for some more assets and just say, let's basically do what OKC did. And we'll take on terrible contracts, give us some assets, and we're just playing the long game to rebuild now. But I mentioned that because Jalen Suggs extension kicks in next season, where he goes up to $35 million. So you got Desmond Bain, who is the highest paid player on the team now at just over $36 million. The extension, Suggs goes from $9 million to $35 this upcoming season. Paolo Banchero is just at $15 million, and this is the final year of his deal before becoming a restricted free agent. Franz Wagner in a pretty similar spot there, where he jumps up from $7 million to $38 million. So you're all of a sudden looking at a Magic team when you look at, assuming those guys are all this core in Suggs, Bain, and then your 2 forwards in Banchero and Wagner. I mean, this is a salary that between those 4 guys is going to push $180 million, if not more, starting in that 26-27 season, where it's still a young core, but it puts the impetus to, okay, we need results now, because as we've talked about before, I think windows in this league are now just 3 years.
Yeah, they're getting shorter. And I was wondering that too, because what Memphis does will be an indication of how they view themselves. Like, I wondered if they were going to look to pivot to being like, okay, we're going to keep building around Ja and Triple J. Like, this is going to be it, because we've talked about how the CBA is altering team building to a certain degree. And I'd wonder on the Magic side of things, with them having a lot of guys in that 30 million range instead of having, one super max guy. Well, we don't know what Paolo's new contract will look like when he finally gets that, but a bunch of guys making, I shouldn't say a bunch, 4 guys making 30 million or something like that. Like, what does that do to your team building around that? Like, this is the part of the offseason where, as the contracts keep coming out and over the next couple of years, just seeing how teams are putting them together Like, what kind of contracts are you trying to put together? What do you think is the best pathway forward based on trying to avoid the second apron because of how restrictive team building gets at that point? So we'll see. Like, Orlando saw an opportunity and they took a swing in a conference that's open. And if you get to an Eastern Conference Finals or a finals, like, instantly you're like, yeah, forget them draft picks. Like, we got what we came here for.
We mentioned the draft picks. We'll go through the details of that. And then again, the anniversary, which happens today for an event that most Bucks fans would like to forget. We'll get into those details coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you about Monarch Money. And if you've ever checked your bank account and had that thought of where did all my money go, think about dining out, online shopping, entertainment. It can get easy to lose track of those things, but that is where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's because Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When you start using it, you'll find little touches there where you never realize how much you were spending on food delivery. That in turn allows you to budget even smarter and save more money. It's the most convenient financial app out there, as you can juggle multiple apps, and you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and plan long-term goals. And if you're managing money with a partner, it's smoother than ever on Monarch Money, as you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. The details, again, we mentioned the players, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony. There's one other interesting piece I do want to touch on before we pivot to this anniversary. The first rounders, the Grizzlies are getting the 16th pick in the draft in a couple of weeks. The Magic's first rounder this year. They're getting a first rounder next year, 2026, but that includes swap rights with the Suns or Wizards, and that Wizards swap right is top 8 protected. So it's probably going to be the Suns pick that the Grizzlies are getting out of this, which may be a really good pick. And then 2028 and 2030 are unprotected first-round picks. 2029, there is a top 2 protected pick swap. Given the age of this group, you never say never. I doubt the 2029 pick swap will be of anything. But betting on pushing it further down the road, even 2028 for that matter, but the 2030 unprotected is the interesting one to me because of what we just mentioned. It's going to get expensive really quickly here for the Magic. That right now they're at $201 million in payroll. The tax is 187. So the Voss family is paying the luxury tax this upcoming season, and they're just nudging up closely against the second apron. That's not going to change in the next couple of years when you factor in, the new contracts you would assume for Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. So I think the big lesson here is teams are going to start saying we're betting on the future because, like we just said, Windows 3 years probably, you're going to have to start to break up that team. So we want your assets after that. And that's what the Memphis Grizzlies are doing here. Now, the other thing I said I wanted to touch on was the notion from Brian Windhorst of, look, you also have to view these 4 first-rounders as part of getting off of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's contract. And that contract for KCP is, I believe he's the second highest paid player on the Grizzlies as of this moment, but he's making $21 million this year. Did not have a good season last year. No. $21 million this year, and then he has a player option for the same 21 figure in the 26-27 season. So in other words, even if it's a first that you're viewing the value to get off of that contract, will kick in a first-round pick. He's 32 years old. Maybe the spacing works out better and he has a reclamation type season here, and you can move him as an expiring contract. But that whole notion of, well, they're also paying to get rid of that contract makes me wonder. I don't know what the fit or the match is for the Bucks specifically, but teams like the Bucks, if you had more assets other than just that 2031 first rounder, and you could use the 2032 first in a pick swap, but if you say, look, we're going star hunting and we're attaching a bad asset, and that's what we'll use to give you everything that we have. So we'll give you a bad contract and we'll give you all the future we have for that guy. I wonder if we see some more of that from other teams.
I mean, we possibly could. And I mentioned it last week when we were talking about second options on the Bucks team, and I was like, should we bring up Kyle Kuzma here? And we both were kind of like, not as a second option, but possibly somebody who can contribute if he is coming off the bench. But with his contract being a declining contract going forward, it's been a lot of talk around if you put his
you
salary.
Got to be careful with declining, Camille, because I think a lot of people would say, yeah, it is declining.
That's true. But if you put that contract, with the first round pick, what could you bring back with that? Like if you start going star hunting, and I'm not advocating for it this summer, but maybe a possibility next summer or, as the trade deadline approaches based on how Kuzma is playing, what that looks like, but also next summer when the Bucks have more access to additional assets that they can start putting into deals going forward. So that's a piece of it for me where I'm like, I'm interested to see how that plays out, because what Kyle Kuzma's contract is, the numbers is a tradable contract. Yeah. Now the on-court play has to be what it is to be looked at as a positive. But I think that contract in next summer too, if he's still on the team, could be a really interesting one to be moved.
So I only bring it up because Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and again, I think it's a safe assumption to say he's going to pick up that player option. Mm-hmm. He's making more money over the next 2 years than Kyle Kuzma.
And he's older.
And he's older. He's 2-3 years older than him. So the play was we had to attach assets to get off of the contract. I think if you're looking to do that with a player like Kyle Kuzma, it's been discussed, you would have to do the same. But as we've talked about, protecting that 2031 as much as you can and the type of player that you're willing to take back for it. I mean, number one, it has to be a player that's under contract for the next 4 or so years, 3 to 4 years, given whatever team you would work this deal out with. You're saying, well, we're giving you fewer years in return and first round equity in addition or in exchange for this longer term deal. But that was the interesting part to me, was thinking, I could have sworn those contracts are pretty similar, if not identical, and looking at it, it's about a $500,000 difference in what KCP is making over the next 2 years versus what Kyle Kuzma is making over the next 2 years. And as you pointed to, the age that Kyle Kuzma is slightly younger. He's not 30 yet, and KCP is in his early 30s. That, especially if you get some type of we talked about KCP searching for it. If you can get a reclamation type of year from Kyle Kuzma, then that becomes very interesting as some type of asset moving forward.
Yeah, and not only would that be beneficial to the asset in the sense of if you're looking to get off the contract, but it could also play well for you this upcoming season. If Kyle Kuzma has a good year for the Milwaukee Bucks, it will increase what their floor is looking into the season. And again, in this Eastern Conference that is looking to be pretty wide open, I would imagine going into next season, the Pacers will be looked at as a favorite in the conference based on this finals run that they had. I'm sure the Cavaliers are also going to be looked at in a certain way, at least during the regular season, for what they can put together. And of course, this is all, we're having this conversation before free agency, so things can change quickly. But as they stand now, like there are certain teams you can look at and say, like, I can expect you to have another strong run. And then again, from what we're hearing, the Bucks are trying to be a top 6 seed. So we mentioned, the Pacers, we mentioned the Cavaliers. You have the Celtics, who are interesting without Tatum because they still have Brown. I'm expecting them to make some type of move this offseason. You have the Knicks, who are still looking for a head coach. They've called like 5 different other teams to try to get their coach. That ain't work out. So we'll see how that works for them. But then you have those teams like the Magic, who we expect to be better. The Pistons, who are also expected to go out here and try to make something shake in this offseason to kind of increase their odds. You have the Heat, who are being rumored in the KD sweepstakes. You have the Hawks, where if Johnson comes back healthy, what can they do? The Raptors have been talked about as being a team looking to go big game hunting this offseason. So once we get to free agency and after the draft too, like how things start shaping up or projected to shape up, is going to be interesting and seeing how the Bucks can try to climb in that hierarchy.
Yeah, and I mean that's the big thing with the gap year notion that I think you have to point out is why it would be that is I don't know how much cap space. It all depends on what happens here this offseason with the Bucks, but you project to have a decent amount, at least some cap space in the summer of 26, but you would also have just as of this moment, 6 players under contract, but 2 of them would be expiring contracts that you would look at and say, well, you want to get off some money? It's right here for you. So that's the interesting part there. And you mentioned the KD rumors. I just want to say this, Camille. I forget where it was I saw it, but the notion or the inclusion of Miami in his preferred destinations for KD, and somebody pointed out, boy, if the Heat get Kevin Durant, are they the best team in the Eastern Conference? No. And I mean, that's a hard no.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're going to be more competitive for sure. But best team, I wouldn't go that way after watching how this Pacers team has been hooping with such togetherness throughout this finals run.
Well, as we mentioned earlier on the show, today, June 16th, is the 50th anniversary of something a lot of Bucks fans, especially the longtime Bucks fans, would like to forget. We'll get into the details next on Locked On Bucks. The NBA playoffs are in full swing every night, delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways now than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are going to show up in the biggest moments? And how could tracking their trends help you build your next bet? If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same game parlay? How could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Well, it was 50 years ago today, June 16th, 1975, that the Bucks traded Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the Los Angeles Lakers. And, you know, the comparisons that you could never quite escape. I mean, the fact that the Bucks won a title 50 years after winning their first title. Giannis instrumental in that second, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar instrumental in the first. All the comps of Giannis, greatest player in franchise history since Kareem, or first player to do that since Kareem. And now it's fully moved into the Giannis is the greatest player in franchise history. But, you know, coming into the offseason, there was a lot of concern over, was this going to be another, hey, 50 years later, Kareem traded and now Giannis traded. It appears we're avoiding that. But I would encourage, first of all, anybody to check out the Substack that Jordan Tresky put out there, kind of going through the 50 years ago, what led to the decision from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, some of the things that have changed since. And I think we're going to have him on at some point in this offseason because he also just finished and wrote a book on building the Bucks and the 50-year process in the making here that goes through that trade. But it's just, you know, it's one of those things that I think it felt like we were headed towards, here we go with this conversation again. And now we're thankfully in a place where you can at least make note of, 50 years ago that this happened. And as of right now, I'm not concerned history's going to repeat itself.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of that is interesting, where you're thinking about 50 years ago on this day, Milwaukee lost a franchise cornerstone, the guy that led them to a championship. And 50 years later, it's been an offseason of so much conversation around the current franchise leader, guy who led you to a championship. Is he going to leave? Does he want out? What's the story here around Giannis? Is this going to be the end of Giannis? Did we see the last of Giannis in the Bucks jersey? And, you know, throughout the offseason, we've had conversations about where are you at? Like, Are you 70-30, 60-40? Where are you at in your confidence level? And as more time is going on and we're hearing more reports about teams are saying they don't expect Giannis to be traded, we're seeing Giannis posting the pictures with him holding up the Bucks jersey while he's,
We also
traveling.
saw another picture, Camille.
we ain't gonna talk about that one on here. This is a family program, Justin. We can't go over talk about that one. But no, it's just, I think for me, it gives me a heightened sense of appreciation. And I've mentioned it a few years ago, like after the Bucks won the championship, of you never know how long windows or eras are for certain teams, and just enjoy watching Bucks basketball while you have it with you. Like, I didn't realize the last Chris Middleton game was going to be the last Chris Middleton game. And, just
we didn't realize the last Drew Holiday game was going to be the last Drew Holiday game.
Yeah, and it can happen so quickly. So really just appreciate being able to watch the guys who are suiting up for your team night in and night out, because you never know when it ends. And I even think back to even the Jabari Parker times where it was like so much hope, but the injuries happen and it's like we never really get to see what that looks like. So just an appreciation. I know, thinking back what happened 50 years ago to today of Giannis, of being able to watch his full career here in Milwaukee, watching him climb up the leaderboards, and all kinds of franchise records, seeing the championship, seeing the MVPs, seeing the NBA Cup championship along the way. But just an appreciation is where I stand, of where I feel about this team and watching Giannis play basketball.
Yeah, I mean, Camille, think about it. Get back in a time machine. Go back to January 14th of last year, 2024. The Damian Lillard walk-off three against the Sacramento Kings, and then, tell people, hey, this is the last time you're going to be able to enjoy Adrian Griffin as the head coach of the Bucks in Milwaukee. Like, wow. But yeah, and the book, I should say, is not out yet either. June 27th is when it releases, Building the Milwaukee Bucks. Jordan goes through how it took 3 years for the Bucks to go from an expansion franchise to win the championship, and everything that went into creating that group, and some of the fallout on the Kareem trade. I mean, you and I are too young to have experienced Kareem in Milwaukee. I have family members that did and talked about it. And I think the one thing that sticks out is the relationship, I would say, is in a better spot now than it was for a while. Like, Kareem was at the finals in 2021, and Kareem has said some nice things about Milwaukee and his time with the Bucks since then. But, that's the thing, is one of the discussions we haven't gotten into yet, and we'll give away too much. Somebody asking me, who were the greatest players in franchise history, most beloved, and an outsider suggested Kareem. And I tell him, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I know I'm not old enough to experience that, but my general impression is, no, he's not beloved. He's not hated anymore, but that was a pretty icy falling out between the two sides. And I think a larger part of it was just the fact of, you're saying you don't want to be in Milwaukee? Like, what's the problem with this community and culture in the city? That was something that a lot of Bucks fans took personally there. So it's one of those interesting things where he's one of the greatest players in the history of the league. And probably, not probably, he is the second greatest player in franchise history. But I still don't think there's really that attachment of Kareem to the Bucks.
Yeah, I don't think that he's a highly beloved Buck, but he's a respected one where you respect what he did.
No longer hated.
Yeah, and no longer hated, because time can heal in that sense. And what Kareem was looking for at that time, which you have to imagine, think about 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we're talking about the 70s here, which was a very important
different time,
inflection point in the history of this country, right? And what Kareem was looking for, he felt like he couldn't get here in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And that was a time too in the league where market sizes played a larger part in your own marketability and what you were able to do. And for the lifestyle that he was looking for, as somebody who was used to being in California, Milwaukee just couldn't necessarily compete, quote unquote, with what he could get in California for his life way of living. So it's understandable too in historical context, but also understandable why people in Milwaukee who did nothing but support, cheer for, root for Kareem and whatnot felt a way about him wanting to leave. But as time has gone on, and more people can kind of be like, I can get it. There's respect there. It helps, but that's also what makes the Giannis era of Bucks basketball so different, because he fully embraced the city. We watched him grow up in the city, and he's always had nothing but positive things to say. He's mentioned, like, my kids are born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So like there's a different level of connection, I think, that Bucks fans have to Giannis than they did with Kareem.
Yeah, and I suppose, and it's been documented too. You brought it up. I said it was a different time back then. We should be careful. I don't know how different it is anymore, but there's been other writings out there too. Kingdom of Fire, a good book on the legacy and the dynasty at UCLA. Kareem and John Wooden, big pieces in that book, talking about, Kareem was a guy that was kind of going through this spiritual awakening. He was just converting to Muslim around that time. And that was, as you mentioned, just Milwaukee, it was different in that sense of the markets did matter and what was available to him mattered. But also, I mean, the one thing you would point to in the similarity is that was a Bucks team that was now starting to descend, that they had just played in the finals in 1974. They lost. Oscar retires. And then the following year, Kareem's final season with the Bucks, they go 38-44. And that was, I think, the other piece of it. Yes, there were those personal things with Kareem, but also the recognition of this team's on the way down. And you look at what the Bucks got in exchange for him. That shaped that era, the 79 through 90 era of the Bucks, to be able to build around those guys that came back in the trade. And that's the one thing that gives you the anxiety that you would look at and say, are we reaching that point with the Bucks where 3 straight first round exits and you're starting to see these pieces, as we talked about Chris Middleton and Drew gone and other guys, who knows what happens this summer, that are you starting to move to that point where you say, maybe you do have to look at how you start to get into that next era. But, again, as we both advocated, you don't make that trade unless number 34 asks for it. So I think that is the biggest difference between these two. As we wrap here, game 5 tonight in the finals. So I'll just ask you this. Does the winner tonight win the series?
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask you a
I think,
follow-up. Is it the home team that wins that game?
I sure do hope so, because my Thunder in 6th edition
okay.
is out here hanging in the delicate balance of how game 5 goes.
I feel like we're getting 7 in this series. It just feels like it's gonna go 7, and we'll get blessed with a Scott Foster game 7 to decide the NBA finals. That'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.